Morning. Today is February 21st, 2022. I'm Frank Farmer, and we're here today as part of the Veterans History Project. We have a guest that's a veteran of not only one war, he's a veteran of two wars. Let me welcome Mr. Erick Piskator. Sir, thank you very much for coming here today.
Sir, thank you very much for having me.
And taking your time. Before we tell let you tell your story, I want to add a note. Mr. Piskator is from a family that he will discuss today that has 5 sons, and all 5 served in the military. So we're going to hear a story not only about Mr. Piskator, but we're also going to ask him about his family history and his brothers. So let me get started, Mr. Piskator. Tell us where you grew up and what made you decide to want to go into the military.
Grew up in Worcester, Massachusetts. Finished high school, and at that time, the military was a very good option at the time. So I joined.
So you joined right out of high school?
Yes, sir.
Were other members of your family, did you have grandfathers, other members of your family? Was there a military tradition in your family?
Not for the Army. My uncle, my mother's brother, was career Navy, and my father was in the Navy for a little bit. My older brother was in the Marine Corps, so that's the only military that we had in the family.
But when you went in, you were at the time 18 years old. You had 4 brothers, is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Where were you in the line of the brothers? The oldest, the youngest, or somewhere in between?
I was the second sibling.
So when you went in, had had your older sibling joined the military already?
Yes, sir. He was in the Marines. He had gotten back from Vietnam. He was in Vietnam in 1966.
So you knew something about what was going on in Vietnam, not only because of the news. This was 1969, correct? Yes, Vietnam War has been raging. As a matter of fact, it was at that time starting to divide the United States. People were starting to protest against it. So you were aware that there was controversy about Vietnam, and yet you went in and you enlisted. And why did you choose the Army? What made you choose the Army?
That's the only branch.
That's well, there are 3 other branches.
It's the best of the branches.
I probably think your brother in the Marine Corps probably would not have agreed with that completely. But so you went in at 18. What did your friends think about? As I said, the war was going on. There was controversy about the war. So you knew what you were getting into.
Right. My friends stood by me. Acquaintances come and go, but my friends stood by me and wrote and did everything else, and they supported me
throughout the time that you were in Vietnam, throughout your military service.
Pretty much.
Well, that's pretty good, because that didn't always happen to.
No, it did not.
As you know, to a lot of veterans. So you joined in 1969. You joined the Army. Where did you go for basic training?
Fort Dix, New Jersey.
And how long was your basic training?
I want to say it was probably 12 weeks.
And of course, after your basic training, you were sent to advanced
individual training.
And where did you go for that?
Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
What was your MOS? What were you being trained for?
I was an armor enlisted crewman.
Okay. And how long was armor school?
About 2 months.
And as I said, when you joined the Army, you knew you were going to go to Vietnam. How soon after you joined the Army did you get orders to go to Vietnam?
Probably within about a year after enlisting, after all the schools and all the AIT training. And when they sent you to jungle training, you knew that you were going.
Where did you go for jungle training? Do you remember?
I can't remember it. I think it was Benning.
And did all the armor officers that were you were enlisted at that time?
I was a crewman.
All the armor personnel go through jungle training. Was
Yes.
that part of the thing?
Mm-hmm.
As a armor enlisted person, when you went to Vietnam, I assume you were going there, you thought, and you would be an armor. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
That's not the way it worked out, though, is it? When you got there, the word I got and reviewing some of your background is that you volunteered to go to the infantry.
Yes, sir.
Well, tell us, why in the world did you do that? The infantry
Walked.
is by They walked. It was usually in very dangerous situations.
Yes, sir.
Usually in conflict. It was a dangerous branch to be in Vietnam, the infantry, and yet you volunteered to go to the. Was there a reason? Was it patriotism, or did you have friends that were going to the infantry? What made you go and volunteer for the infantry?
I guess I got caught up with some of the soldiers that were with me, and they were going, so I kind of went with them. But when you're 18 and you're in a different country, you just go with the flow, and I kind of did. And then after a while, I kind of regretted it. But I went back to armor.
But you were in the infantry for
about 6 to 8 months.
6 to 8 months
Yes,
in Vietnam.
Yes, sir.
The infantry was usually in direct contact with the enemy being the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese.
Yes, sir.
And as I understand it, you also volunteered to walk point. Now, for the viewers of this, let me say just a few words about point, and I'll have Mr. Piskator say much more about it. The point is, as the name implies, the point of whatever advancement was going on. You're a big guy.
Yes, sir.
You kind of stand out. So walking point is not a real Tell us what walking point. What was the?
Again, I have to say the 18-year-old in me, but it wasn't. I volunteered for it. Is you're the new guy, and the new guy has that position until someone comes in to replace him. And I walked the point, and they gave me a World War II Browning automatic rifle, and you use that. Well, we did. In our instance, that's what we had, and walked the point.
Now, tell us what a Browning automatic rifle, often referred to the soldiers as a BAR.
Right, BAR.
Tell us about that weapon. You said you carried that weapon. Tell us what kind of weapon it was, or what you thought about that weapon.
It was a 30-06 caliber. It was long. It was heavy, gainly, but when you fill the magazines up, if you want to send the patrols in a certain direction, you just put it on full automatic and you shoot in that direction, and everybody else knows to fan that way, to look at that engagement.
Now, you said it was a heavy weapon. What did a BAR weigh?
I want to say close to 20 pounds. It was long and heavy.
So you were carrying that. In the terms of the infantry, I think the infantry term walking out is humping it along.
Yes, sir. We humped everything.
You humped everything, which means walking wherever you go. You carried what part of Vietnam were you assigned to when you got there and you went into the infantry? What part of Vietnam was that?
Central Highlands, near Mang Yang, An Cam, Pleiku, LZ English, up in that area.
Tell us what kind of weather and terrain is in that part of it. Is that in Vietnam?
Central Highlands.
Vietnam was divided by the Americans into 4 parts. There was I Corps, 1 Corps up in the north, and there was 4 Corps down in the Mekong Delta. What corps were you in?
I would have to say the second.
Second. So you're about 3/4 of the way up toward North Vietnam.
Yes, sir.
When you were there, so you carried the BAR. Tell us about some of the other equipment you had to carry when you were out on patrol.
Well, you always carry extra M60 machine gun ammunition, a belt of ammunition for the machine gunners, and you would carry claymores.
Tell us what a claymore is.
Claymore is a device that you put out like a mine, and it's filled with explosives and like ball bearings in it, and it would cover an area. If you detonated it, it would cover a vast area to protect yourself at night.
So when you went out on patrol, sometimes these patrols would be several days.
Yes, sir.
You were out there, and at night, what was it like at night in the Central Highlands? Central Highlands, if I remember, had a lot of North Vietnamese troops that were there, as well as the Viet Cong.
Yes, sir.
Did you face both those forces, both the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong?
Yes, sir.
Again, for the benefit of the viewers, tell us what's the difference between a North Vietnamese troop and a Viet Cong?
The North Vietnamese troop were trained soldiers. They went through training just like any other country would have for their troops. And the Viet Cong would be conscripts who, like the militia, they just got up, they gave them a gun, they gave them a weapon, and sent them out. There was very little fire discipline, very little trail discipline on the roads coming up, and not that much as a soldier.
But the Viet Cong were an effective force, and I'm asking your opinion of this, were an effective force in the sense that they blended in with the population.
Because they were the population.
And so therefore they were difficult to identify.
Yes, sir.
Some of them could be in your camp. Some of them were with South Vietnamese troops, is that correct?
The barber at An Khe at the PX turned out to be a VC.
Which unfortunately was not unusual.
No, it was
not. In Vietnam at that time. So you've told us about the BAR. You also carried an M16, did you not? Now the M16 was the basic infantryman's weapon, weapon. And every veteran that we've had come and talk to us, we've always talked about their opinion of the M16. Because the M16, to many of them, seemed like an inferior weapon in the sense inferior to the AK-47. The AK-47 being the weapon that the North Vietnamese used. When I say inferior, I mean in the sense that many of the veterans thought that the M16 jammed easy, was difficult to clean in that sense. What was your opinion of your M16?
Well, my opinion of the M16 is it's like a tool that you have on your tool belt. You have to know what it does, know its capabilities and its limitations, keep it clean, keep it operating, and it worked.
So you really didn't have any problems with it jamming, or as long as you kept it clean and took care of it. Is that correct?
That's right, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you have to take care of the magazines, and you can't get mud in the. You just have to take care of your ammunition and your magazines.
And I assume that the non-commissioned officers that were in your unit tried to make it sure as possible that was always being done. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, everybody. You did it on your own.
Now, when you were in Vietnam, what was your rank? E1 being.
I came over as a private first class E3, and I left as a sergeant E5.
Okay.
And on note with that, I took home a captured SKS rifle, and I brought it home as a war trophy.
SKS,
which is the version before the AK-47. It's not automatic. It's functions the same way except no magazine.
Was that Russian made? Was that a Russian made weapon? Chinese made weapon?
Chinese carbine.
Okay. I've already asked your opinion of the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese, but let me ask your opinion of them as a fighting force. What was your opinion of the North Vietnamese as a fighting force?
They would fight, take directions, do maneuvers in battle, whereas the Viet Cong would do skirmishes, just shoot and then run. And they didn't engage as much. That was my impression.
Okay. Did you think the North Vietnamese were a formidable opponent?
Yes.
Okay, that's pretty direct and pretty simple. And of course, the North Vietnamese had been fighting for pretty much hundreds of years. Fought the Chinese, then fought the French, then fought the Japanese, then fought the French again.
Yep.
And when we arrived in Vietnam, they fought us. So they'd had hundreds of years of soldiering on. Let me ask you about all soldiers and all wars seem to always remember their rations or what they ate. Most of the time, not with a great deal of satisfaction, but. What were your rations? What did you eat when you were out in the field primarily?
C rations, the meal in a box, and everyone carries a P-38, which is a can opener. You'd sit down, you have a box like this, and you open it up, and it's got a main meal. It's got crackers and jelly or crackers and peanut butter, and some of it was quite edible, and some of it was not so edible.
Well, tell us which one. Do you remember which one you liked? Which
Beans and franks and spaghetti and meatballs.
That seems to be kind of a universal thing. The spaghetti and
probably-
meatballs and the beans and franks seem to be one of the favorites. Well, let me ask you, see if you agree with what many people. What was your least favorite version of the sea ration?
Well, we had one version that if you got it, you could give it to a starving dog, and the dog would run away. It's called ham and lima beans.
Ham and lima beans. Again, that's pretty much universal. The one that seems to be the most disliked version of the sea rations.
There's a good reason for that.
Do you remember? There's a story told by many Vietnam veterans on how they heated their coffee. Do you have any particular reminiscence on how you heated your coffee?
Yes, sir. We used explosives, composition B, or we just put it on the rear deck of a tank on the exhaust and warmed it up.
When you say you use the explosives, tell us about that.
Well, you have sticks of explosives with you, and you take your knife.
The C4? Is that what?
C4.
What's C4?
And you cut it up in a little slice. You put it to rocks, you put your can above it, and you'd light it. Your cup right on top of it.
So it burns, it will not explode unless you have a blasting cap.
Unless you stomp on it.
Okay, so C4 burns very hot.
Yes, sir.
And you use that to...
Sparingly.
Sparingly. Did you ever stop to think, and the reason I ask this, we've had in the past a Vietnam veteran who calculated how much it costs to warm up a cup of coffee by burning C4, and he came up with a figure for every cup of hot coffee warmed up by C4. It was $275 to the United States government.
I kind of dispute that fact, because what's more important? And I would have to say a hot cup of coffee.
Well, he agreed with that too. So,
I think his figure of that amount of money is negated.
Now, when you were in Vietnam and you were out on patrols as an infantry enlisted man, did you ever do any operations with the South Vietnamese troops, our allies?
I did it when I was in the armor unit, back at the armor unit.
Okay. What was your opinion? I mean, overall, the time you spent in Vietnam, the time you spent with the South Vietnamese, what was your opinion of the South Vietnamese as a fighting force, as our ally? What was your candid opinion?
Now, to be really honest, I was a Spec 4, Specialist E4, or an E5 Sergeant. I really didn't have that much direct interaction with them. I follow our orders for what we had to do. ARVNs would do what they had to do.
ARVNs being an
Army
acronym, ARVN, Army of the Republic of Vietnam. Correct. Okay.
The South Vietnamese Army.
But yet you were around them. You were around American troops who operated with them. What was the opinion, do you think, of the American troops of the South Vietnamese troops as a fighting force?
They fought when they had to, but when it's just downtime to do maintenance on the vehicles and personal weapons and in this, that wasn't handled. And the joke amongst us was, we're doomed. And that was it.
Yeah.
They just...
Do you have any casualties when you were there,
Yes, sir.
among your killed or wounded, or
Both.
both?
Both.
Okay. Americans during the war were accused of atrocities, but I think the North Vietnamese were also accused of committing atrocities. Without getting particularly in any disturbing details, did you come across any instances where the North Vietnamese committed atrocities?
Yes, sir. On our way on patrol towards Cambodia, we came across what was done to American people that were captured as prisoners of war. And it stuck out in your mind.
These were Americans who had been captured,
yes,
and then
low rank, regular, not pilots or high-ranking people. Just they'd have to take care of them and feed them. So there were just, a problem with them. So they did things, and they've had experience with what they did to the French soldiers in the early 50s, and after their Meng Yang and battle at Dien Bien Phu, what they did to their prisoners, and they had a lot of practice, so they did it to the Americans.
Okay. Now, when you were in Vietnam, of course, when the United States went to Vietnam, we went to help. The stated mission was to liberate the South Vietnamese and ensure their independence. When you were there, did you think the South Vietnamese population supported the South Vietnamese government or supported the American troops or not?
I think they supported themselves. It was evident that they weren't prepared because a couple of years after we pulled out, the country fell.
Did you have any inkling did you feel that Vietnam would not survive, would not exist?
Yes.
Did many of your fellow soldiers have that same feeling?
Yes, all, pretty much.
Did it?
Yeah.
Okay. How long were you in Vietnam total?
2 tours, sir.
2 years?
Just short of 2 years.
You did 2 tours. Were you ordered to do the second tour?
No, it was either do the second tour or go back stateside for duty stateside. And this would adjust the clock and get you out in ETS early. So I stayed.
So if you volunteer for a second tour, they would drop some time from your obligation, and but yet you were still in Vietnam, and you were still in a dangerous environment during that period of time, right?
There again, sir, 18-year-old, foreign country.
Oh my gosh! So what year did you come? When did you come back from Vietnam? Return home?
15 February 1972.
And that was the time that the frustration and the division in the United States was really boiling. How were you treated by the U.S. population?
Came home, landed at Traverse Air Force Base, went to Oakland Army Terminal to out-process. And of course, you're given the traditional khakis, issued khakis, and to go home when you're discharged. We go to the airport, and they bust us, and it was kind of a theatrical affair getting there. It was people were, like they do in California a lot, get in the streets and do all sorts of things. And at the airport, it was an interesting event, because you're talking, people didn't want us there in Vietnam. Well, we didn't want to be there either, and we were going home after being in combat, and they were saying, well, there's nothing you can do to us, and different things, and egging people on in uniform, and sometimes it didn't end in their favor.
But you were in uniform when you went into the airport to...
Yes, sir.
Were you being discharged at the time, returning home?
Yes, sir.
They allow you to fly, and the reason I ask this is that at some point, the United States really ordered soldiers not to wear the uniforms when they flew domestic because of the protests, etc.
Well, the problem with us at the time was we didn't have any civilian clothes.
I guess they were at a bind then.
You know, you're coming back with a little bag of just your personal stuff. You have no clothes.
I've talked with Vietnam veterans in the past, and when some of them that did have civilian clothes were ordered to wear the civilian clothes on trains and planes, it really hurt many of them. And how different it is today, when a veteran comes home and walks through an airport in uniform when they get claps. So it was much different. So you came back at that time, the nomenclature of the GIs returning to the United States, the world was the United, came back to the world.
Yep.
And you got out of the military, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And went to work. What happened to you after you got out of the military? You came back from Vietnam.
Got out, try to find myself for a little bit. Went back into the reserves. Financially, it was very good at the time. I was out probably 2 years. I got on the fire department up in Worcester, Massachusetts, and I stayed there for 22 years.
So you went into the reserves. And then you became a commissioned officer while you were in the reserves, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
When did you become a commissioned officer?
July of 1977.
You became a second lieutenant, is that?
Yes, sir.
Second lieutenant? Was that with the armor branch
sir.
Also? And you continue to work for the fire department in Massachusetts for 22 years?
Yes, sir.
So here you are, you're in the reserves, 1980s. Suddenly, in the early 1990s, Saddam Hussein invades Kuwait, and we're involved in another war.
Yes, sir.
You got activated at that point, did you not?
I did.
And where'd you get sent then?
I was sent to King Khalid military city, KKMC, in Saudi Arabia. Well, we were sent back to Fort Dix, New Jersey, to form a battalion to go to KKMC.
And what year was that? What time was that?
91.
91?
Or 90, I can't remember.
That was when Desert Storm was...
That's right.
Were you there as part of Desert Storm?
Yes, sir, I was.
Tell us about Desert Storm for the viewers. Tell us what Desert Storm was, please.
Desert Storm was, as you know, a coalition of all these different countries going after one aggressor. And the one thing that was good on my point of view, in my opinion, was we went there with a mission, a distinct mission. We went there with a distinct objective, and we prepared our supplies and our logistics for it. And the only thing we had was, you will win, and that is it. We will not sustain anything. We went in there, we did what we had to do, and we came back.
Now, the Iraqi War in the early 1990s was an armor war. Was a terrain built for armor fighting?
Yes, sir.
Were you in a tank or a armored
A couple
vehicle?
months in, I was after that. Yes, sir.
Did you take part in what was called the end around or the?
No, I didn't do the left.
Okay, the left sweep that sent I don't know, hundreds if not thousands of tanks around the right flank of the Iraqi army, and essentially simply trapped them at that point. And the war did not last very long. No. Were you there when? I assume you were there when the Iraqi forces were surrendering in literally the thousands.
Yes, sir.
Well, tell us about the Iraqi soldier. What was you've already told us about the opinion of the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong during the Vietnam War. Tell us about your opinion of the Iraqi soldier.
Well, emotionally, they were tired, they were exhausted, they were hungry, they were literally dirty. When we'd get the buses to shuttle some back, we'd have to steam clean the buses out because they were so dirty. We'd go through our MREs, the newer version of C rations, and we just hand them out and they just sit there and eat them and eat them and eat them. And because they hadn't eaten in a long time. And all of their higher ranking people knew what was happening, and they just got up and left the troops in the field.
So they were ill-trained, ill-equipped?
Well, they had some of the best equipment.
Where did that equipment come from, most of it?
It was Soviet-era equipment, but they had some of the best equipment, but the problem was they didn't know how to take care of it, maintenance-wise.
So it just fell apart, or it was not functional, they couldn't function?
We would find brand new rifles with cosmoline on it, the packing grease, and they're out in the field.
That it's amazing that at that time, by the way, I think the Iraqi army was the third largest in the world.
Yes, sir.
It was a huge army, and I assume that Saddam Hussein had the opinion that they were an effective fighting force.
Well, don't forget now, they fought the Iranians for 8 years, just before Desert Storm. And the problem is, they lost a lot of their corporate knowledge through death in war. A lot of the higher-ranking people didn't exist. And there again, people with very little experience, or just, I want to get in a vehicle and do this, this, and this, and they looked good at the beginning. But you'd get some of the vehicles, and oil was never checked in vehicles, track tensions, maintenance on the wheeled vehicles, the trucks and the heavy movers. They just drove them. When they broke down, they got another one.
Was it your opinion that the average Iraqi soldier was a poorly educated? The reason I ask that, I've been told that the Iraqi army was made up in large part of nomads or desert tribes that really had very poor levels of education.
I can't address their civilian education or the civilian intelligence. The military training they must have received as conscripts was probably very limited, because there was no light discipline. There's no discipline in the trenches, the World War I trenches that they dug. The radios were blaring. It was not like, you just look at each other and you go, really?
The Iraq, you described two entirely different wars, being in the Vietnam War, being in the first Iraqi War, and the wars were fought vastly different. As you've pointed out, you were told in the Iraqi War what your mission was to win. It was to win. That was the mission.
And our leaders, our generals, they had one thing in mind: go into it, advance to the goal, win that battle, and win the war, and that's it.
And of course, many commentators say that was not the case with Vietnam. Many commentators say that there was no clear-cut goal or a victory, etc. Do you think, and the wars were fought, as we've said, vastly different. Do you think that the American military and the generals learned something from Vietnam to the Iraqi War?
Yes, sir. I have to agree with that statement. The general staff of the military, they did everything in a correct manner. They did everything not to sustain the fight, but to win that battle and move on to the next one and move on to the goal of victory. I saw the big difference in the way the troops were, the discipline in wearing the uniform, in fire control with the weapons. It was amazing. And the logistical resupply was just outstanding.
So it must have been quite an experience to compare your time in Iraq with your time in Vietnam and look back upon it. And I'm going to ask you some questions about that in a moment. But how long were you in Iraq?
Just short of a year.
And when did you come back from Iraq at that time?
I want to say 92, February of 92.
Did you stay in the reserves then?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When did you finally retire from the military?
1999.
And your rank when you retired?
As a major.
Your major. So you retired as a 04,
yes,
and got out. And where'd you go then? What'd you do with your civilian life? You'd been in the fire department for 20-some years prior to Iraq. So you came back. Did you go back to the fire department?
After Iraq, I did.
But you've also gone to other
yes, sir.
Other areas.
In early 2000s, applied for Immigration Naturalization Service as an immigration inspector. When you enter the country, that's what we did. And I did that until then Department of Homeland Security came about, and we were brought into what was called Customs and Border Protection.
So you were in Massachusetts when you were in fire department, when you went into the military.
Yes, sir.
You came back from Vietnam, went back to the fire department, stayed in how'd you get to Florida?
Drove.
Well, let me ask you this another way then. What brought you to Florida?
I think the epiphany I had was it snows too much up there.
It was too cold.
And at the time, I had a brother on the Key West Police Department. He was a detective. And it was warmer down here. So I relocated down here.
Was this with the Immigration Service or the Border Patrol or Border Protection?
I ended up going to work for back for immigration up in Jacksonville. Yes, sir.
So that's how you got down to Florida, and
yes, sir.
In part to get out of the cold weather, and in part because of the job in Border Protection.
Yes, sir.
The other thing I want to ask, I don't want to forget your 4 brothers.
Yes, sir.
Who all served. So your mother and father, 5 sons all in the military. That's an amazing record for your family to have. Are your brothers still with us today? All your brothers?
No, sir. I've lost 2 siblings, and 2 are with us.
Okay. Now, and I'd asked you this early on in the interview, but I'll ask you this again. Out of the 5 sons who were in the military, how many served in Vietnam?
2.
2? Did any of the others serve in Iraq or any other?
As a matter of fact, myself and 2 brothers were in Iraq for Desert Storm, and 1 brother did Panama and Desert Storm.
Your mother and father, your family must have had a tremendous amount of anxiety, having, first of all, 5 sons in the military that could go in harm's way at any time, 3 sons that were in Iraq, 2 you said were in Vietnam.
Yes.
My God, that's a tremendous record. I'm not sure I've run across any other family that had more than 5 sons of the same family that were in the military, and especially with being put in harm's way that much. So that's extraordinary. I asked all veterans this, Mr. Piskator, so I want to ask you this. Here we are 50 years after Vietnam and almost 30 years after Desert Storm. So let's take Vietnam first. Looking back on that 50 years,
Yes, sir.
what do you think the United States did right or the United States did wrong in Vietnam?
This is my opinion only, and I think what we did right was it was a noble cause at the beginning. At the time, time and place means a lot. What part of the years it was in, like in the 50s after the French left, communism was a big thing back then. And I think we did a noble cause going in there to stop it and help the South Vietnamese manage themselves better. What we did wrong was we had no exit in mind, and we didn't go to win. If we went to win, I think we could have done a better job.
And that answer is pretty much the same answer I get from all Vietnam veterans. And of course, we're looking back on that 50 years, and,
Right.
and hindsight's always perfect.
Yeah.
But that answer. So let me pose the same question with Iraq. Here we are now. We're out of Iraq. We're out of the Middle East. And looking back on Iraq and our presence in the Middle East, what do you think the United States did right or the United States did wrong?
Well, I'm not going to go into wrong because I don't want this turn political or anything. I think what we did was we went there, we showed a presence, and there were some people there that got their they deserved what they got. And I think there are people in Iraq and in the Middle East that want to do the right thing and live in a democracy instead of a tribal mentality or under a fascist ruling, but they don't speak up, and if they do speak up, they disappear.
Well, we're essentially out of Vietnam today. Although we are now have trade relations, we now have a relation with Vietnam, and Vietnam did not go the way many people thought it would go. I mean, as far as aligning with Russia or China, Vietnam seems to have aligned with itself. That's and of course, what's happening in the Middle East, probably time will tell. And historians will look back and debate that for many years to come.
And if you look at history in the past, there's always been fighting in that area of the world at the beginning of time. And I believe that we just are part of that time frame where we went in and fought and left. The British were there a couple of times, the Russians, and other countries that thought they could go in and do it justice, and that didn't work for them also.
Well, that's probably why historians refer to as the graveyard of empires.
That is the term.
For things. So,
absolutely.
I think, Mr. Piskator, we've run out of time, so I want to thank you again, sir, for coming here today and taking the time to come and tell your story, and also to thank you for your service. We appreciate that, and to thank you for your family's service, for gosh sake, sir.
And I thank you very much, and I'm very humbled to have you interview me.
Well, that's been my pleasure, sir. Thank you very much.